Thing.
It's true.
Microphones and everything.
Yeah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The work session obviously was canceled prior to this meeting. Agenda is before you. Any corrections, additions, deletions?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mock. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Farah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Next is public commentary. Isaac Rubio. If you don't mind, Isaac, come up to the microphone here and state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Rubio. I'm the director of the Campus Activities Board at Dalton State College. I'm here not exactly to speak directly to you all, but to everybody in this room. Most colleges are located in the city of which they serve. But one of the issues or one of the difficulties with Dalton State is that it is located on the other side of the 75. So my goal here is to bridge the sort of gap between the campus and the city. We are trying to improve the retention rates of our campus. And one of the ways that we're trying to do that is by continuously looking for ways for our students to get involved in the city. And with that, we are looking for from anybody, for any volunteer projects that our students can work on, work and internship opportunities, just really anything to improve and inspire the lives of our students. So if there's any opportunities that anybody can offer to our students, you can talk to me and I'll direct you to whoever can help you accomplish that need or goal. Thank you.
Can you please repeat your name, please?
My name is Isaac Rubio.
And you're employed at Dalton State?
Yes, I am the director of the Campus Activities Board.
Okay.
We're really the ones that organize all of the events on campus for our students. But I am kind of going overstep of going outside of my role as the director of the Campus Activities Board in hopes of creating more opportunities for the students.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Mr. Parker there will be able to help you too.
We met last week, Mayor, and had a really productive conversation and certainly made available to him all of the department heads and how we can better interact with the college.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Worthwhile goal.
All right. Thank you.
Next are the minutes for the mayor and council meeting of February 20th, 2023. Any additions, corrections, deletions?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Sams. Second by Mr. Mock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. New business professional service agreement for limited asbestos survey for John Davis Recreation Center with Terracon Consultants, Inc. Caitlin.
Good evening. This item is to request approval for the professional service agreement and proposal with Terracon Consultants. It's to complete limited asbestos survey of the administrative offices of John Davis Recreation Center. This can't be done, or demolition cannot be done, or remodeling until this is completed. The cost of the service is $5,800 and it will be funded through 2020 SPOS.
Any questions? Your motion? Motion by Mr. Mock. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 3, contract with Georgia DOT for grant funding for construction and design projects at Dalton Municipal Airport. Andrew?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I have here a contract with the Georgia Department of Transportation and the FAA that will enable us to receive 1.9 million, just over $1.9 million in federal and state grants The majority of this is 1.7 million goes toward our ramp rehab phase 2 project, which is to repave the main parking apron in front of the terminal building at the airport. The rest of that is to design the runway and taxiway pavement electrical rehab and design obstruction removal on the 3-2 end of the runway. The state portion of this fund will be $13,166. The local match is $11,587.02.
I do have a question, Andrew.
Yes, sir.
The second part is just design. Do you have funding for those in the pipeline too?
Yes, we do have funding through the federal infrastructure bill, and then our regular AIP allocation. So we're confident that we can get that project funded in the next couple of years.
Okay.
So explain to me then, the 1,000,009 is for what?
For
For those three things?
Yes.
Okay.
So the majority of that, about 1.7,
Yeah.
is for the repaving of the apron, the main parking.
The whole thing in the match is going to do those three things.
The majority of the apron funds has no local match. Those were COVID funds. So we had no local match on the construction for the apron. So those were 100% federal funds. And then the other smaller projects came with a state match and a local match. That was 90% federal, 5% state, 5% local. So that's why the local match is so small at 11,000. Normally on that project, we'd be paying 5% of the 1.7 million.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Mock, there's a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Sam's. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
Thank you.
Number 4, professional services agreement with Beyond Security for Fortinet networking equipment deployment.
You, Mr. Mayor. No. This is a contract that we're seeking to get for the city. We're looking for approval for professional services from Beyond Security to help the city with the city's IT department in deploying the network equipment and to use best practices in security. The professional services contract is set not to exceed the amount of $20,000, and that's already coming from the IT's operating budget for 2023. Do you happen to have any questions?
Any questions?
No.
Is there a motion? So moved. Motion by Mr. Fair, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
Thank you.
Right of way, number 5, right of way encroachment permit for 265 North Hamilton Street.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The right-of-way encroachment request is for the installation of a grease trap to serve future restaurant located at 265 North Hamilton. The grease trap will be located in the alley at the rear of the business. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sam's, is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. Mock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 6, right of way encroachment permit for 301 North Hamilton Street.
Is the right-of-way encroachment request is for the installation of a grease trap to serve future restaurant located at 301 North Hamilton Street. The grease trap will be located in front of business under the sidewalk.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sam's, is there a second? Second by Mr. Mock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 7, fiscal year 2022 budget amendment number 6.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is budget amendment number 6. It's actually our final budget amendment for 2022. As you can see, our revenue for the general fund increased $1.5 million. And as you're aware, we've adjusted that throughout the year. So revenues were really good this year. So 1.5 million. Most of that is tax revenue. Because the bills went out late, we anticipated a lower amount and we've gotten in about $1 million over what we budgeted. Sales tax, $180,000, interest income about $57,000, miscellaneous revenue, $103,700. The miscellaneous is with the opioid settlement revenue that we received this year. And then the additional amount of transfer in of the hotel motel tax, $99,540. We had a couple departments that went over slightly over budget. We had to transfer out to the senior center before we liquidated that fund. We didn't have enough cash to pay it out, so the county had to pony up half of it. Our half is 6560. We had to transfer out to debt service for administrative fees of 15,635, and transfer out of airport grant $13,100, which hopefully we'll recoup that because some of the grants haven't been written yet that we've expended funds for. So we were able to cover all those costs with the overage in the public works fuel. So we will be adding $1.5 million to our revenue. And we're going to come in at the end of the year about $1.5 million utilization of fund balance.
It's my favorite kind of budget amendment. Any questions?
The other, I have some other accounts too, but it's just showing up where we ended up.
Okay.
Like interest income or additional revenue from hotel motel tax, things like that. But the general fund was the largest.
Your motion? Motion. Motion by Mr. Mock. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sam's. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 8, fiscal year 2023 budget amendment number 1.
Yes, this is our first budget amendment for the fiscal year 2023. We have donations of $10,000 from Community Foundation for the Burr Park project, the concrete paver replacement. That budget will be $22,215, and the remainder of that will come out of our contingency budget. We had insurance reimbursement of $26,390 for damage to a fire apparatus truck. So that will be going back into the repair so that they can take that insurance money and repair it. We had recreation building repairs of $22,110 for the Matt Gaston sprinkler system. We received that money in November of 2022, but they are not going to repair it until now. They're ready to go with it now. So that revenue went into last year, but the expense is going to come out of 2023. So we had additional revenue of $36,390, and we've offset that by $36,390, taking into account the budgeted contingency. Capital Improvements Fund, we had $2,719,400 of carryover unfinished projects. A lot of those were delivery chain items that we've done. We've issued POs for them. We just haven't received the product yet. And we also needed additional funds of about $10,000 for the city AV project. And then we've estimated our interest income and sale of capital assets and our fees for the GovDeal sales. So we'll be increasing revenue into that account of $25,000 and taking into consideration $2,731,900 for expenditures. And that is sitting in its fund balance. So no additional revenues coming out of the general fund. It's sitting in cash at the end of the year.
Explain that again.
We had projects that we had budgeted for. If you recall, we moved a little over $3 million into the CIP fund last year, and a lot of those projects didn't get finished. So we're just carrying over the amount.
Back into this year. I got you.
The money's sitting there. We don't need additional funding, but the projects will get closed out hopefully within the next few months.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mock. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Farrell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Cindy, I think we got recognition again from the state on how great our financial. Yeah.
Government finance officers.
Yeah, good job.
It's actually US and Canada.
Yeah, good job. Number 9, Master Professional Service Agreement, Deckard Technologies, Inc.
Mayor, I'll take that one. This is a project that the clerk's office, finance, and my office have been working on. As you know, the General Assembly a couple of years ago adopted a new provision to the revenue code that requires short-term rentals to remit hotel motel tax to the local agencies if they so choose to collect it. And we do. We have been now for a little over a year. The only challenge with that is that we have no ability really to monitor proper remittance to the city of the hotel motel tax from these short-term rentals. we simply receive a check and there's no way to really back track that and audit that. So there's a vendor that several cities in Georgia are starting to use called Deckard Technologies. For the cost of $3,000 annually, they'll actually crawl all of the short-term rental websites and give us reports on the locations of the short-term rentals within the city, but more importantly than the location, the utilization of those short-term rentals. And this will allow us to better track those revenues that are owed to the city. It'll be funded from the clerk and finance office operating budget from 2023.
I read through that. They had $179,000 is what they had already mined. Is that actual numbers? Or is that just?
I think that's projected. I think last year we received about 80,000 throughout the city from the 7% hotel motel tax on short-term rentals. So again, there may be short-term rentals that are not remitting the required payments, and this will help us
Plus the occupational tax.
be more
We
accountable.
want, we'll know where the locations are so we can charge the OT.
That's good. So it's well worth $3,000.
Yes, sir.
The agreement has been reviewed by the city attorney's office as well.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mock, second by Ms. Sams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 10, intergovernmental agreement with Dalton Whitfield County Joint Development Authority for Coronet Drive Stormwater Project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We have been talking about this for several months in the Finance Committee meetings. This project's related to Joint Development Authority tax abatement project on engineered floors expansion at the Coronet Drive plant. Part of that economic development incentive included some repairs to a pretty major storm drain that runs in and outside the city right of way underneath the Seratine plant, which is where the project's proposed, approved by the JDA and validated by Superior Court. The project will involve the repair of 2,140 linear feet of stormwater pipe. This is the JDA, as part of this incentive, takes title to the property. So this would be conducted essentially on JDA property for the life of the tax abatement deal. We are working with Public Works to coordinate an RFP, and at a future meeting, we'll bring before the council the actual cost, which we anticipate to be between $1 million and $1.5 million to do the pipelining, which will facilitate this project going forward. But tonight, all we're asking for is approval of the intergovernmental contract between the JDA and the city to perform such work.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mock, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 11, resolution 23-05, approving introduction and passage of local arts in 2023 regular session of the General Assembly of Georgia to provide for local referenda of the electors of the city of Dalton to consider approval of increases to the homestead exemptions from the city of Dalton ad valorem taxes and for certain persons and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Again, since last summer's property tax assessments came in, we have been working to identify solutions to mitigate the dramatic increase in assessed values for property owners within the city, particularly as it relates to where residents claim the homestead exemption. As you know, if you followed the General Assembly, the legislature is looking at a statewide $25,000 homestead exemption that the state would cover the cost of up to $500. But again, as we look for solutions locally to combat these challenges, the solution that the staff in working with the elected officials has identified that makes most sense for the city at this time is to support an increase to the homestead exemption, exemptions that are already on the books that citizens in the city can receive, just increasing those exemption amounts. So I'll take them one at a time. The first is the S4 exemption, which if you're age 65 or older with a gross income of less than $35,000 annually, you qualify for a $75,000 annual homestead exemption. This resolution would indicate to the General Assembly that the council would support increasing that to 150 or doubling it. And then the second thing that this resolution would do is support the increase of the age 70 exemption, which in the city, there's no limit on income once you hit age 70. It would go from 150,000 to 250,000. And again, we feel like this is sort of the best solution to help combat some of these increases to the folks that in many cases need it the most. This resolution does not do that on its own. It just calls for a referendum for the voters to approve this once and for all. And it would go into effect January 1, 2024. So it would not affect this year's tax collection or the homestead exemption amounts this year.
I have a question. Has this in actuality already passed the General Assembly?
No, it's not even been read in yet.
So how can it be passed since today's the crossover day?
Local
Right,
legislation.
it doesn't apply to local legislation. You're right. You're right.
And when's the proposed election?
Believe it'll be in the November general election.
Okay. But this year, if those giant reassessments hit, there's nothing we can do.
Other than the state's $25,000 exemption, that's currently the only mitigating factor.
Does this
What do we
have
do
to
about
be
what-
done by a referendum or we could just do it?
I'll defer to the city attorney.
Yeah, Mr. Farrow, yeah, Constitution has a provision, there has to be a local referendum, and as to each question, we have to have general, and the delegation's on board, as I understand. Andrew's had conversations.
Yeah, yes, the delegation is meeting tomorrow. We understand that some of the other taxing authorities are also considering this proposal verbatim. The county, as you know, has already acted on what they propose to do with the county M&O exemptions and digest measures. But I understand that both school districts are also considering making these changes.
So this is only for the city government.
This is only for city government M&O. It would not apply to the school system M&O.
Although the way the act would be passed, it would affect the school budget. So I talked to the school board attorney today in Gainesville, and I think they're anticipating joining the city on this, the Board of Education. Well, their attorney is a Harbin firm out of Gainesville, and that's where he's.
So you're anticipating that the school system here in the city will also adopt a similar resolution?
Yeah, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but conversations with the school superintendent, they have indicated that they're preparing to do this as well, present it for the board's consideration, a similar resolution which would support going to the General Assembly to ask for these measures to go to the voters in November. And I will say Cindy has done a great job at reviewing what the impact to revenues would be. We anticipate this being a approximate $92,000 revenue reduction to the city, but at the same time, we'll be able to realize some of the reassessed values throughout the city. So that will mitigate some of that $92,000 revenue loss.
Your motion?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Mox,
Second.
second by Mr. Farrow. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 12, ordinance 23-01, the request of Melanie Honig to rezone from low-density, single-family residential to medium-density, single-family residential R3, a tract of land totaling 0.21 acres located at northeast corner of Tyler Street and Chattanooga Avenue. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This request is a fairly straightforward, simple one over in the Crown Mill, old Crown Mill Historic Mill District. And this corner lot here, the petitioner is requested to rezone. Currently has no dwellings on it, no development whatsoever. And their plan is to construct a new single-family detached dwelling that would be similar to the older historic mill homes in this area. The reason for the R3 request to go from R2 to R3 is to provide a little bit more flexibility with setbacks and things like that as to the position of the home on the property. This would allow for one home to be constructed on the subject property as it stands. And in terms of effect to this area, changing from R2 to R3, we cited no issues. Planning and zoning, we heard no opposition, and Planning Commission recommendation was unanimous to approve this rezoning. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Your motion?
To approve.
Motion by Mr. Mock,
Second.
second by Ms. Sams. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. 13 ordinance 23-02, the request of Sergio Paez to rezone from rural residential R5 to neighborhood commercial C1, attractive land totaling 0.22 acres located at 401 Hawthorne Street. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This rezoning here, going from rural residential to neighborhood commercial, took a little time to digest, and we've reached out to city department heads as always with rezonings, especially like this one, where we have essentially a 5-point intersection there at the southern terminus of this property. So there's a good bit of traffic, some visibility issues there that were raised, and the sense of looking at this property from a zoning standpoint, neighborhood commercial is a pretty restricted commercial zone. This is a pretty small property, so we did not see an issue with the commercial zoning of this property for neighborhood commercial at this location. The challenges that came from this property and the proposed development to be essentially what we understand to be basically like a food truck drive-through type operation was the management of the traffic, the ingress and the egress of this property. It was noted by city officials that we wanted to reduce or to limit, I should say, access, ingress and egress specifically to, I believe it's Spencer Street at this location in order to make sure, mitigate any kind of traffic issues based on Robert Street, East Hawthorne, that area where traffic's moving faster and visibility is a lot lower. With that, the staff recommendation did recommend a rezoning of this property. And the condition for this property, the two conditions, was to limit access to Spencer Street, as well as to require a parking plan in order to illustrate the subject property's ability to provide sufficient parking for the proposed use. That heard no opposition at the public hearing, and the Planning Commission recommendation was also to approve with those two conditions. Happy to answer any questions.
If they do a food truck, is it going to be a permanent food truck location, or?
That would be the
Okay.
location as we understand where they would want to permanently.
Would they have to have
Okay.
a grease trap for that, or do you know that?
That will be an environmental health requirement. They'll have to have a food service permit with a fixed base of operations in order to receive their mobile food service vendor permit.
Okay.
Any other questions? Your motion?
Allen, Ivan Allen's grandparents' home, is that the lot we're talking about? You know,
Sure.
the former mayor of Atlanta, his grandparents or
I believe so. No, Councilmember Farrell, I believe that's directly across the street. It burned some years ago. But this is the lot directly across the street from that home where the home used to sit.
Can you, Ethan?
Oh, I see. Yeah, right. It would be that triangular blue property. Yeah.
Can you repeat the two conditions that the professional staff recommends be included?
And the first condition is to limit access to Spencer Street only, and to require a parking plan in order to illustrate the subject property's ability to provide sufficient parking for the proposed use.
How are they going to limit the Spencer Street access? I'm looking at the photograph. By what action could they do that?
I
How
think
could they
another
comply
way,
with that condition?
I think the intent of that condition, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Townsend, but it was just to say that they couldn't pull a curb cut permit on Robert Street or Underwood Street. They have to access the site from the more lesser traveled Spencer Street. In other words, if the rezoning's approved with these conditions, the staff would not issue a curb cut permit on Robert Street since it's more heavily traveled. Am I correct?
Are there curbs there? Yeah, I go with
I don't know how you're gonna enforce that.
Anna Lee's concern, how you gonna limit them from pulling in and out
Yeah.
from there if you don't have a curb?
I don't know if we have the ability to show this slide for the people in the audience and online, but that's gonna be difficult.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there is curb, there's just not curb cuts on Underwood.
So you're,
Permitting process, we wouldn't allow them to permit driveway there.
okay, so to be clear, Ethan, the condition is sufficient parking plan.
That is
And-
correct, because there's also a 20-foot buffer that's required. We don't have to make that a condition. It's required by the Unified Zoning Ordinance for the north end of that property. So when you start looking at the setbacks with this property and the size, there were some questionable concern whether or not it will be possible for them to create the parking and the aisle for ingress and egress with the setbacks being a corner lot with the 20-foot buffer.
Shouldn't they know that before we approve this?
They wish to proceed forward. We did explain that to them, but they seem to not be worried about that.
With those two conditions and access only off of, what is our recourse if they are, I guess if there are curbs, they cannot access it off of anything other than where they have a curb cut. So if there are curbs that are going to make it unpleasant to access off of Roberts, then I'll make a motion to approve with those two conditions.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Sam, second by Mr. Mock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 14, ordinance 23-04, the request of Brian Spence to rezone rural residential R5 and high-density residential R7 to 0 lot line residential R4, attractive land totaling 2.849 acres located on Sheridan Avenue. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This rezoning here is basically taking 3 tracts of land to rezone them from R7 high-density residential and rural residential to 0 lot line residential. And very briefly, the change there with the R4 zone district, we call it 0 lot line, but it's not truly 0 lot line. It just gives a little bit more flexibility with setbacks. And for a single family detached zone district, it allows the highest unit per acre density in development that we have in the Unified Zoning Ordinance. And to give you some example of that density, the lot side setbacks can be, as long as there's 10 feet separating building to building, then that's the only side setback that these lots have to accommodate. Just wanted to make a quick mention of that to give you an idea of the density that can be achieved on this type of development. But when we look at this area and we look at existing development, and particularly the adjacent R7 multifamily zone district, that of course allows for much higher unit per acre density and more flexibility altogether. So we did not see an issue with this rezoning, and quite frankly, R5, which is adjacent on all the areas, allows duplexes and types of multifamily. So we didn't see any issue with this creating a character that didn't exist in the area. The issue that came up with this rezoning, it took some time for us to discuss, and we reached out both to county legal counsel as well as city legal counsel. And we had a meeting in order to determine the most proficient maneuver for this. And that issue is, if you all flip to your packets, you'll see the city county boundary. And the issue here is we determined that only one of the 3 parcels was within inside the incorporated city limits of the city of Dalton. And that is the long, narrow tract that actually accesses the Sheridan Avenue. And when we looked at that, we first believed that the best route here would be to either have this entire property annexed into the city or de-annexed in order for it to be all within one singular jurisdiction. The issue is the property immediately to the north, being the North Georgia Toyota dealership, which is a county island, or is almost a county island. And if this property is fully annexed, would create a county island. So that was not a viable option to move forward. So the recommendation for zoning was decided to move forward as the jurisdictions are currently. That is one tract, which the recommendation that I sent forward only deals with one parcel of land in this overall property for development. So the city would only be currently tonight rezoning one piece of this property. The other two tracts would have to go before the county next week to be rezoned as well. The recommendation was to approve the R4 rezoning, citing no issues with the density or the type of development and the zoning in the area. And there was a condition in the staff analysis that was written prior to our having that meeting and determining that annexation was not possible. So there was no condition that was made at the Planning Commission meeting on this property, and the Planning Commission recommended to approve the rezoning as requested with no additional conditions. However, after looking at this again, we've decided that it might be worth putting a condition onto this, that any development on this property where a street is constructed, a new public street, which will have to occur being that this will be a major subdivision, will fit or will comply with the city's subdivision ordinance in terms of building that roadway, any sidewalk requirement, any right-of-way requirements, and all those requirements be met for the city properties.
Is this property already serviced by Dalton Fire Department, Police Department, or is it county serviced?
It doesn't look like there's any structures on the property. Even,
That's right. There's not. It's
okay,
not-
so
it's-
even
it's vacant.
these the ones immediately to the south, that are the narrow.
If I'm not mistaken, those narrow tracks to the south, this GIS aerophotography, this is why we update it every 3 years. There have been some duplexes constructed on those narrow lots.
Those are, and those were in fact county lots. The old staff analysis, we didn't have that up-to-date information. We had to do quite a bit of reconciliation with GIS to determine which of those lots were actually in the city and which were in the county. There was a tax assessor issue with that, and we went back and determined that those tracts had never actually been annexed into the city. So we were able to confirm that.
So, yeah, I mean, in short, to answer your question, right now it's just an empty lot. And where we get a call out there for a ground cover fire or something to that nature, yes, it would be, we would respond to that little narrow strip if the dispatcher got it right. If not, they wouldn't. And once they start construction, it would be the same. We have several areas in that that district that's an issue such as this. For case in point, the self-storage out there just down the road. It's a city building, but the parking lot's in the county. Had a fire there the other day and the county went and we sent one truck. So that would be a similar type issue.
Okay.
So knowing, Ethan, that, thanks, Chief, that Mr. Spence wants to develop this and put high density housing on it, is it his plan to access the other two parcels from Sheridan? I mean, is that going, because the
That is
parcels
correct.
that
That's
are
correct.
on, what does it say, Roosevelt? I mean, so he's just buying a part of those parcels, or already owns a part of those parcels?
That's correct. The only street access that exists with this property as it stands, the subject property and his proposed development, is the strip of land that is currently within the city that accesses Sheridan Avenue. There is no other current access to Roosevelt Drive.
Okay, so the other two that are to the east, that red line doesn't indicate city boundary. That's the part of the existing tracks he's buying or has bought.
Yes, the red line on the aerial photograph, that just shows the entire subject property
Okay.
consisting of those three track. The yellow lines delineate the actual parcels
Mhm.
within the subject property. And the only one currently within city boundaries is the one all the way to the west, which is the one that actually provides the access to Sheridan.
So the condition that you would put, the professional staff is recommending is that the entire development would have to be for roads and curb and sidewalk would have to be to city standards
Well,
when it
that
goes
would be
before the county.
ideal.
I
That
mean,
would be
that,
ideal.
I understand it being ideal, but we keep getting our, we have the unintended consequence of doing one thing and then a few years later, I don't know, it gives me a lot of heartburn that.
Yeah, and who enforces that? Who is supposed to make sure he does everything to city standards?
Well, in the city's portion, it would fall under the city's enforcement and the county, of course, would be inspecting everything on the side that would be county.
So what you're saying is it's possible they could build the part out in the county. It's not within our specifications.
Without specific conditions that would require them to do so, yes, sir, that is correct.
How can we bound their zoning to our standards?
Well, you could require, you at the very least can require them the portion that is within the city would have to be built to city standard. And then that it would be outside the city could be built to county standards. If it's
guess
an issue with,
I have a hard time too, Ethan, is he gonna put a structure where there's kids going to school and it's like, is that structure gonna sit, on the county side or the city side? And I mean, it gets convoluted very quickly.
well, and that was our dilemma early on in terms of trying to solve that issue with annexation or de-annexation. And unfortunately, there was no way that we could ask Mr. Spence to annex the full property in because it would create a burden on North Georgia Toyota property that they would then become a county island, which would mean that at that point forward, they could be forcibly annexed at any point in the future, which is not a position a lot of people want to be in if they're in an unincorporated county. So there were some issues there with the legality of creating that county island with North Georgia Toyota. And if this property were zoned as R5, then we would have the same exact issues and they would be able to move forward.
Why not de-annex the city parcel into the county? Then it doesn't seem to be an issue.
That was one of the options that staff reviewed. Philosophically, we've pretty well had a longstanding philosophy that de-annexation is not a consideration that the council will make. But if we're hearing that might be the better option, I don't think legally, city attorney, that there would be any reason we couldn't require or ask the developer to de-annex.
That's
It's
true.
just we want to avoid setting a precedent that other folks could ask to de-annex if and when it's beneficial to them.
You're correct.
I think this is messy. And
I agree in a sense of that's why in the original staff analysis, we recommended to either fully annex it or de-annex it. And once we determined that there was no plausible way to annex it, then de-annexation, but understanding that what Andrew just mentioned, we didn't see that was going to necessarily be an option. So if that's an option that the council is willing to consider, certainly the professional staff would recommend that would be a much better solution than to have the property split between two jurisdictions for all those same reasons with the school system and service delivery.
How would we do that from a procedural standpoint?
From a de-annexation, he would need to make an application, would he not?
He would need to file an application and we explained that to him. He didn't give us any issue with filing an application to do that. So we can reach out to him and have him do that. I suppose this could be tabled or it could be approved with the condition that it.
I think we need to table this and
That's what I
get this
think.
back up. Yeah. There a motion?
motion to table.
Motion by Ms. Sam's table, second by Mr. Farah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
Thanks, Ethan.
Number 15, reappointment of Earl Boyd to the Dalton Airport Authority for a 5-year term to expire December 31st, 2027. Their motion.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sam, second by Mr. Fair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 16, appointment of Brenda Barrett to the Dalton Housing Authority for a 1-year resident member term to expire October 14th, 2023. Motion by Mr. Mock,
Second.
second by Ms. Sams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 17, appointment of Zach Adamson to the Dalton Housing Authority for a 5-year term to expire October 14th, 2027. Their motion. Motion by Mr. Mock. Second by Mr. Fair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. There being no supplemental business, I'll entertain a motion. We adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
You didn't do Lily like that.